Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Ripple Intent Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Kyle McCroskey, and with me, as always, is John Grant. John, please say hi.
Hey, listeners. Great to see you again.
Always great to see our listeners on the podcast. This is something that we really enjoy at Ripple Intent. You know, where we've been on this path to try to help people just become better people, better teammates, better leaders, and we do that through a number of different mediums. And our podcast happens to be one of those, where we get to magically see everybody and influence them and how they behave and how they act and who they are. And we do that by having some pretty awesome guests join us on the conversation or with these conversations. And today is no lightweight by any means. Mike Williams, principal at Stantec, healthcare studio design leader in Phoenix, somebody I've known for many, many years. He helped us get some things going in Phoenix with Ripple Intent and Volunteer. And part of the reason that happened was I got introduced to him and immediately felt his passion for collaboration. This is going to be a pretty design and construction heavy podcast, talking about things where we bring people together, give them, some cases, hundreds of $1 million and say, don't screw it up. That's kind of our industry. And he recognized early that there's ways to do that actually increases our chances of actually not screwing it up. But more importantly, build relationships, respect people, actually collaborate. And it always caught my attention. And what I love about Mike is his energy and passion has continued to drive those things. He wants to see those things in his projects. He wants to see those things in his people, and he wants to see those things in others. And so thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you both, Kyle and John, for having me. And that's a great introduction. I will tell you that I was drawn to you after the first Denver symposium you had, 2015 maybe, timeframe, 14, 15. Your opening statement at that symposium let me know that you were quite a bit different than most people who lead these sorts of discussions. I remember you got up and you said, you introduced yourself of Banner Health, and all of you people are here to steal my money. And he said, doesn't it feel that way? And I thought, okay, that's an interesting opening. I'm watching your boss sit next to you, or sitting at the table next to you, and he's like popped up out of his chair and looked up. He wasn't expecting that introduction either, but you grabbed me at that moment. I was like, okay, I got to listen to this guy. What is he? Where's this going? This could go someplace really good.
So I didn't have you at hello. Is that what you're saying?
No, not quite at hello, but shortly thereafter, I thought, what a way to open. All the architects and engineers and contractors in the audience, you're here to steal my money. And you just let that sit for a minute. That was the best part, is you just hesitated after that. I think you had everybody.
Well, it's what you're taught and reinforced if you work in a client side where you hire those companies, is first and foremost protect our resources from the evil bastards of the world, because they are all here. That's their whole intent, is to take our money and run. And we are actually rewarded when we hold those people accountable and we tighten the screws. And I'll never forget early in my career when I was able to, quote unquote, negotiate down a contractor's fee from 4% to 3.5% or whatever it was. I got the wink and the nod and the thumbs up, and hey, that's good job. You're helping out us as the client. And of course, that was completely evaporated through the course of the job. But again, internally, we were rewarded for treating the world that way. And for most part today, that still happens.
Yeah, it does. And it's not remarkably different on the design side either. What we do with our engineering consultants and how we manage our fees. My favorite part is owners give you RFPs on a project that's going to take 6 years to do, and the scope is somewhat squishy, and you have a 5-page RFP with a paragraph to describe the project. And what you want from me is down to the penny fee, schedule, manpower, and everything else. And then the project doesn't turn out to be that. And then when we come back and say, well, Kyle, it's different than this. Well, but here, this is what you signed. Those are always fun conversations as well. The whole industry's set up that way, to give as little information as possible initially, and then sign the bottom line, and then the project kind of drifts from there, that point forward, back and forth. I mean, that's one way to look at it. And yeah, I looked at it that way until about 10 or 11 years ago when I got in my first IFOA IPD project, which going into it, I didn't think it was going to be any different. I just thought the terminology and the acronyms were different. But it truly was different. It was one of those times in my career where in the architecture side, or move to where my skills would help a general contractor, an owner, or somebody else. I was looking at lots of different things at that time. I had been an independent consultant for a while doing healthcare planning. That put me on the road too much, but I came to move to Phoenix, helped the company establish an office here. That company had a project with a national for-profit hospital system. I was able to be part of the IPD team, and the leader of that group had come from a lean background, a true lean background, not necessarily a construction or owner rep background. And he brought a kind of a refreshing idea to the table, that there's been a couple of studies done on the construction and design industry that there's about 35 to 40% waste in it. Some of it is inherent. Unique projects on unique sites, you're always going to have waste, right? You can't do a machine or you can't do manufacturing sort of lean improvement in construction, but there is a portion of the waste you can drive out of the project. And his idea was, I want a portion of that waste we drive out, and the team can keep any more that they drive out. So really a sharing contract. Establish market price, establish what we think the target value can be, and then we'll all sign a contract and move that way with as many people who want to jump on board as possible. So, and then, I always separate IPD from lean IPD in my mind because of that project, because he then overlaid a very interesting continuous improvement matrix, which included, as I've told you before, strengths finders. We ended up at a point in that project where we were having a tough time. We did strengths finders. Rex Miller came in for 2 days. We were all wondering, we're behind schedule, we're over budget. Why are we taking 2 days off to talk about, our strengths? He found right away that the two leaders on the architectural design side, if you will, and on the construction side, I think had 4 of the top 5 in each top 5. Command, self-assurance, achiever, responsibility. I think we're present in both of them. And that was creating a lot of, who's achieving, who's commanding, sort of tension. And we rearranged the team. And I kind of poked my head up and went, okay, that's interesting. The team's willing to rearrange. These leaders who were known as leaders in both of their institutions now are stepping back? Really? For the good of the team? Okay, I probably ought to pay attention to this. What's going on? Then I learned a little bit about my strengths, which, restorative number 1, learner number 2, achiever, responsibility, and strategic. I've taken the test 3 times, and all 5 of those land at the top. The bottom 2 flip. That's the only thing that's happened. So that's kind of who I am. And then I figured out, okay, now I know why I drift on projects. Now I know why I focus on certain things. The problem's there. I'd love to solve it, love to find it, love to dive into it. If it's not there, why am I here? Where do I go to find another problem? So learned a lot about myself there. Learned why I probably don't fit into certain types of teams. I'm probably not the best person to be in a strategic leadership position in a company, because sometimes those are unsolvable problems, and that's not a great place for me to be. where I can get into project issues. I learned all of that in that first project, and it was successful. It ended up being a very successful project that was talked about across the nation. We got a chance at a second one. That one ended up being very profitable project for the 11 signers on the team. And then that leader left that company and went to Disney and did great things with Star Wars at Disney. And I was left with this kind of new skill set, new idea, seen some different results, and brought that to an owner, Banner Health, who was on the path, slowly but surely plodding along, looking at improving projects. Everything was going pretty well if you talk to the leadership. I was competing with firms that had been entrenched with Banner for a long time, so I was pitching a much different approach. And I got the chance to put up or shut up on a project. And that's where you and I met, Kyle, during that time frame. Another person who, oddly enough, at the general contractor level, Sean Williams, had worked for that same owner under that same regime of kind of, I call it IPD without a net, sort of. You know, we've got this great idea. We've got the ability to move the needle and share in savings. He had kind of drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. And he and I had a chance to get together and create a team inside of a design assist framework on a project that was not fully scoped when we got there. And we were able to create a team. And I think inside the contractual structure we had, that one was very successful. And I think it impressed upon some of the innovation we brought to that one. That's a term I don't use lightly. We brought some prefabrication and modularization pieces to Banner Health that they hadn't fully done to that level before. I don't consider that innovation, but in the terms of what we were talking about, it was different for Banner. And I think Banner is still using some of those techniques in moving forward. So I feel good about that. That was a successful project for me as well.
So, Mike, what I'm hearing out of this, I love this. I love your journey and kind of how you've learned, through the self-awareness, how you show up, right? How you can impact the people around you. So, am I correct in hearing that when you're talking about project success, I mean, clearly there's like financial success for the organizations involved, but this is a lot about the team coming together, right? This is about human collaboration, and there's really this to me sounds like the business case for why we actually need to change how we collaborate and improve that human connection.
So yes, and I would say my eyes were probably never on the goal of financial success. I believe if we put everybody in that room in a position to succeed and apply their talents to their best, to their fullest ability, we will succeed. I think that's a given. Financially succeed on the project, but it's incumbent upon the leaders to figure out where those people need to be. Right? And to figure out why two people aren't working well together. And this project for Banner, we did strengths finders at the beginning of it. We made cards that sat in front of us. When we sat down in the big room, we had a card in front of us that had our strengths and our core, orange, green, blue, that whole thing. So we understood we were talking to people with all green, what that meant. They want details. They're going to go work on what you tell them. So be careful what you tell them. You've got people with blue. They're not listening to what you're saying. They're listening to how you're saying it. Right? That's the key. They're watching your body language. And as you understand those kind of nuances, you can understand how people are succeeding or how they're not feeling included. And I'm a big believer that, you get a bunch of mid-career people together who've been in their professions for 20 years. There's probably 95% of them are really good at what they do, and allowing them to do what they do without barriers is the best way to do it. Now, in my profession, we have project managers, project architects, job captains, designers, planners. We break our profession up into all these titles, and oftentimes we're expected to build fees around these titles. And this person, the planner, has 8% of the fee and is going to work X number of hours. I get in trouble sometimes in my internal places, because if that person is hitting it off with somebody else and we're following the project, I don't care if they work 20% of the hours. I'll reduce it somewhere else and move these people around, because that's what's best for the project, what's best for the person. And that may sound easy, and it isn't, but it's the way you look at it. You got to read a room, you got to be able to figure out what's working, what isn't working, and then have a team of people with you that are also seeing the same thing and be able to move it. And I think on this banner one, we had some bumps at the beginning. There were some people who weren't believers. There were some people who really wanted to try something different, and there were some people who were sitting in the back waiting for the chance to say, "See, this doesn't work." And I think we had those bumps, we had those discussions, but I think at the end, given the contract structure and how we were pursuing that project, it was as successful as it could have been. I think we ended it right in COVID, so the startup of that was in the mess of the falling knives of COVID all over the country. But other than that kind of startup bump, I think it was a successful project for everybody. And quite frankly, in this market, there's still a lot of people who I run into who still say they were part of Team Fusion, which, by the way, the whole team renamed themselves Team Fusion. And that even got into the email signature blocks of a lot of the leadership. We had a logo. We had posters on the wall that reminded us to, stay above the line, not below the line in our communications. We had our conditions of satisfaction on the wall in each meeting room. Some fun stuff. And oddly enough, the person who created all those graphics was the project manager for the general contractor. They thought, oh, the architect is here. They have a graphics department. They're all artists, so they can do all this stuff. And I was walking around and I noticed on his iPad, he was sketching caricatures of each person in the big room. And I had a little bit of an issue with the one he was drawing with me, so we talked for a while about I actually had more hair than that and wasn't that chubby. But once we got through that discussion, I was looking at what else he did. He was showing me all this, and I'm going, "You've got to use this. If we're thinking about these posters, they've got to be there." And Kyle, you've probably seen these posters. I don't know if you know, Sean did all that artwork.
No.
And those are people in the little IPD caricatures. Those are people from the big room. So I pushed him into that corner, and his wife's a graphic designer. They went home and came back with the idea for Team Fusion. I said, "Great, let's put them up on the wall. Let's go." And that may be something you don't see in a typical project, where you would rely on the general contractor's project manager, who's self-assurance number one, to bring the artistic side of some posters to help align the team. But that's one of those things where you walk away and you just kind of go, well, that was interesting. He really felt included at that point in different ways than he may have just inside of his job guardrails.
Oddly enough, so this is the first I've heard of Team Fusion from you. I actually saw that logo and the conditions of satisfaction poster that's being used. I was auditing a lean course, and someone had that pulled up on a slide as an example of amazing team collaboration and what you can do. So it's living on, Mike.
It is. Oh no, I shared those things with LCI several years ago, and I go into presentations and I see them, and that a lot of pride in that. I walk out going, well, it's impacted more than just this people, and if this stuff can help anybody else turn the corner that I kind of turned, or other people have turned, that's fantastic. Use it all you want. You want to know the whole story behind it. You want to know which guy is the one with a little bit of hair over his head. That was me.
So you drove or advocated for a lot of these things and continue to do that, but I'm guessing that your original, as you talked about how you were pulled into this project kind of blindly, just go here, go do this, and by the way, we're going to try some different things, and you're like, okay, sure, let's see what works. But now it's shifted to much more of an advocacy, and it's a combination. What I've seen with you is both the lean aspects of the tools and the processes, combined with, and you said it in your story there about what's best for the project and best for the people.
Mhm.
um, can you expand a bit on when you say best for the project, best for the people? What does it mean to say best for the people? Because I
Well,
think you see it very naturally, and I think people listening are going, "Oh, I know what that means," or maybe I don't know what that means. But what does that mean to you, and how do you see that?
well, I think, just the nature of my profession, somewhat apprentice driven still, somewhat rooted in, overlay and trace. Those architects who listen to this will understand what that means. Back when we used to stack pieces of vellum and trace things over, we're going through a significant disruption as an industry, uh, the design industries. I think for the people to be in a room where they can interact with the people who are going to build what they design is a level of connection that is usually two or three layers removed in a traditional design process. The engineer works for the architect, project manager, then the project manager reports up to the project director, who reports up to whoever manages the client, and then they tell the client what's going on, and the client tells the contractor, and that goes down to the trade, goes down to the person who's actually building the ductwork. That's the problem. You get rid of that middle piece and bring the people together. I think that builds better engineers. I think that builds better project architects. I think that fosters discussions that aren't through RFI processes. So that's a great piece of it. Building the people in these ways, when they get in a room and they understand that people are coming to them for their specific contributions they've seen in the past, just this co-location idea of, if you're in the room for a couple of days and you've solved a problem outside your title, your business cards area of expertise. You're a project architect. Okay, you're the person I go to, where are we going to put the five knuckle hinges into the hollow metal frame? Well, maybe that person solves something in the ED planning. And oh wow, wait a minute, that was unexpected. How can we build that? And then I would go to that person and say, well, you had a really good eye for that. Do you want to be in planning? Yeah, nobody's ever asked me. But I'd love to be a planner, but I'm in this slot in the profession. So uh, I'm not afraid to go to my company and say, you know what, this person wants to do this. Okay, well, we'll move them over to the planning slot. No, they still want to do this. So let's figure out a way to get them involved in both. So let's build the people. You can't really figure that out. People can tell you that in year-end reviews, but until you've observed it firsthand and see that they've had a little bit of success. This person said something about the ED planning. The look on their face after everyone said, wow, that's a problem we didn't even conceive yet. But you're right. To see the look of pride on that person's face, that's something you've got to build. That makes a better person, makes a better architecture company, makes a better project, makes everything better. So that's the piece of it I wasn't really in tune to so much until I had that 2-day course with Rex. And it wasn't really the strength finders that pulled it out of me so much. It was watching the reactions around me, watching the 4 months of interactions we'd had, which were, tentative in a lot of cases. Are we really here to change this? I've got to protect myself, to, okay, now we're fully here, to use terms that I know you like to use. We're fully here now, and we are invested in this. And now we're all going to fail together, or we're all going to win together. And that's a mind shift. It really is in our industry, as you know. Now, can we bring pieces of that to our internal building of people? Yes. Can we bring it to all the projects we do? I'm working with some owners who are not very far down that road. They're still believing that, we need two contracts. We need to be the intermediary. We need to make sure these people don't steal our money, sort of mindset. But you can bring that to them in small bites, and begin to change the people. So that's the change the people part. I think it's really observation. It's careful observation. And then it's none of these slots we use in our different businesses really mean anything. They shouldn't mean anything when somebody wants to cross them, and we shouldn't say no. I've actually hired people in this market in the last year who got to a crossroads in their company and were told this slot or this slot, and and I was talking to them and said, you know what, I don't care which slot you're in. You want to come over, we'll figure out a slot for you, and was able to pull those people out. So that is I guess I have a little bit of a reputation for that. So when people get to a mid-career point where they want to go in a different direction, sometimes they're in companies that don't allow them to do that. And you can move them. So that was kind of how I came out of those projects, was having a completely different appreciation for, how you can do a project without this traditional pyramid style labor curve. There's a principal on top of 6 projects, and he works, 10 minutes a week on each project, and he's got project managers that manage 4 people, and then for those 4 people manage 3 people. You've got these pyramids, and the communication is vertical up and down, and there's all these slots about performance and hours and fee burning. You break all that down, you get everyone in the room, and you start talking about where are we with the project as a collective. All of a sudden, everybody owns it. They don't just own their little slot in that pyramid. And that's a big epiphany for a lot of people. Oh my God, we're over budget. I had no idea we were this far over budget. And they can start to bring solutions that they see from maybe their perspective, instead of this kind of communication pyramid where it's the gates, and those are oftentimes performance metrics that can inhibit good communication. Nobody wants to tell everyone they're 20 hours over their budget. Sort of stuff in those communications. If you get everybody in the room, you can have those discussions as a collective.
So you've seen the light. Let's just go there for a second. So you experienced it, you've seen it, and you still see a huge opportunity for, it's not just our industry, man. It's every team. We were at various book clubs, and we went through the whole Zappos thing. And one of the things that most people picked up on, no surprise, was one of their big differentiators in being successful. It didn't have to do with the culture and all the cutesy shit that you hear about on, the social media. Well, we pay you to quit and all that stuff. No, it was one of their big factors to success was they decided to treat the suppliers with dignity and respect. Turns out in the retail shoe business, the traditional business model was beat the vendors down to buy the product as cheap as possible and then turn around and resell it for the highest possible margin. And what they said was, that's a really crappy way to treat people. We're not going to do that. So we're going to actually treat them with respect. And what do you think happened? They obviously grew quickly, and people liked working with them, which allowed them to continue to grow. Now, there's all kinds of discussion around more of the aspect of the whole company and the culture and all that stuff. But the important thing that the folks that I'm reading this book with came out with and said, wow, they do what we do. When you treat the people that you hire, the firms that you hire with respect, they will do good things with you. And it was kind of like, duh. Moment, but you've experienced that, and then you've also took it even further than that and go, oh, let's expand on that. So it's not just treat them with respect. Now let's talk about what that really means in action. And when you start talking about, let's look at how the workflows, let's look at how we have these relationships, let's look at our communication pathways. I mean, this goes to any team of multifaceted companies coming together to try to achieve something. And there's some, it's that's what I love about you, is that you look at it and go, duh, why aren't we all looking at it this way? Do you not see the potential that we have, not just for the project or the product, but more importantly, the potential we have of the people in front of us?
Yeah. And I probably would have been one of those people, Kyle, before I got pushed into that room and had that moment. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have been at that point in time in that position, because it was, I didn't realize how much different it really was. I'd heard, there's lean IPD going on all over and down the West Coast. And you worked in Portland on some projects that were ish I think ish. And that's where I think you got a little bit of your fever for this too, as you started to see if we bring everybody together, we can start to break down these barriers. But I came out of there going, I just went through a project that broke every metric that we're told is sacred in the architecture business. We drew fewer sheets, probably a third fewer sheets than we would have done in a traditional project. We had 5.5 FTEs at the peak, maybe 6.5 FTEs at the peak on a 275,000 square foot greenfield hospital. We had a lot of senior leadership buried in the project. So there was 3 principals that worked probably 18 months at 20 plus hours a week on the project, which is very rare. Actually, that created a gap elsewhere in the company because these principals were supposed to be leading other projects. That was actually something we learned internally, that these IPD projects that do this, they want the more experienced people in the room for a longer duration. That starts to upset that multiple pyramid with you at the top of 3 or 4 of them. But it's one of those things where we came out of it, and I loved when I give my discussions on the introduction to lean and delivery, which I do a lot of for LCI. I always have the general contractors in the room raise their hand. I said, if you've put a hollow metal door frame into a steel stud partition, raise your hand. And I said, okay, keep your hand up for a minute. Okay, architects in the room who have put a hollow metal frame in a metal stud partition, raise your hand. And I said, those of you with your hand up, notice none of the architects raised their hand. I said, then why do you RFI me if I don't put those details in the drawings? And that's my starting point, is that's waste. Why are we doing it? Roof plans. These IPD projects, both of them, we hired a roofer. We put him under the profit at risk part of the contract. And I remember sitting down with him and he says, well, give me the plans, give me the design for the roof, and I'll get started. And I said, how about you design the roof? The owner wants a 40-year roof. You build roofs for a living. I don't. Actually, I'd like to have you help us locate the drains so we minimize the cutting of insulation. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I finally had to convince him that, I didn't just escape across the street. I'm here to have you do this. He came back with plans. We gave him access to the Revit model. Next thing you know, he's working the Revit model. Next thing we got a roof plan. I looked at it. I did my due diligence and I stamped it. So I didn't draw a roof plan or the details or the specification. That was all part of it. So, you start pulling these chunks out by pushing work to the people who are the experts. You have to have a very interesting contract structure to do that. As you know, Kyle, that the typical contract structures don't typically support that sort of thing. But those are the things when you come out of those projects, you just walk out and you go, duh. So I'm walking around going, duh. Why not have the cabinet maker do the interior elevations? Because they're going to draw them again and send them to you in 6 months. And you're going to look at them and stamp them and send it back to them that they look good. Why not just have them do it the first time and not do any of that other part? Right?
Yeah, it's those dumb moments that really get you to think. I think you need both, not just a contract structure. I think you need a true willingness of whoever's the money holder, whether it's the client or whoever. You have to have a willingness to go, yes, there is a way, or at least I'm curious, or I'm open, or I would like to learn about what is available, because we did a number and continue to do a number of ish projects. Been able to do a handful of actual IPD with the contract, and even that took an enormous amount of internal negotiation to make happen, because of a variety of things. And so that initial appearance of this is risky can be a huge internal hurdle to get over, and it's risky from a lot of people and a lot of different departments within a client organization. And so when you say, hey, we're going to share risk, that of course will throw up the risky flags. And so it is both. If you can get to that contract, and then of course you have to have the people who want to actually make it happen, because it does get hard and it gets weird and it gets uncomfortable. And like you experienced, even with that in place, you can still butt heads and still have tension and frustration with the people you work with, because no surprise, there's people there and those things happen, and the contract will not fix the opinions of other people and those frustrations. And so there's all there are other things to help overcome those things. And so both, and that's the part that I love about you, Mike, is you look at it and go, yeah, if we treat each other this way, then we'll produce good things. And if we approach the people and the project together as just as important as each other, then some magical things will happen. And I've done it and I can prove it. So why are you not doing it? um it's that pretty
Yeah.
pragmatic of this will help drive success.
Well, John may lean in here. That's the restorative in me, right? Here's a problem. I found a solution. Why can't everyone see the solution? It's right here, guys. um, and
I'm sure
it's
you
not
haven't
that
found a
simple.
solution that you couldn't make better.
Well, that's the kryptonite, right? Okay, Mike, let that go. Move on. Move on. Yeah.
Never stop.
Yeah, never stop. But the interesting part you bring up there, Kyle, is the internal struggles. I wouldn't say I've had struggles. I've had misunderstandings um, of how to do this and whether or not it's appropriate to rearrange a studio around a project type you get to do 1 out of 5 projects. And that is a legitimate pushback, because we come off of one of these projects, we're all sitting around smiling, what a great project, and then I have to go work on the design bid build rural hospital with general contractors who were building houses last week, the absolute farthest into the spectrum, and I've got to be able to manage that type of project and do that one. So um, internally, my former company, it was interesting. We were able to share that internally, and we got a lot of groundswell about trying to push the existing clients that way. Some successes, some minor ones. The company itself wasn't interested, and it may be unfair to say this, but I would say largely I got the feedback they were interested if it helped us win a new client. They were less interested in changing 80 years of entrenched success because of one client in the healthcare sector. And I think I can see their perspective as well. But what they didn't know didn't hurt me. So I was out here in Phoenix, they're over in California. So we kind of built it the way we wanted to build it. We built a team and we were able to move work around. I had collaborative meetings. We're meeting to talk about the design. I would bring the people who were drawing it in. You need to hear this so you know what you're drawing. So you know who to ask when this looks crazy to you. Why did you do this? And break down those barriers that often happen in the cubicles, right? You draw it, you toss it over to somebody else, you move on to drawing the same thing for another project. It's not an assembly line. And the people are important. I mean, in my side, what do we produce? I sit back and I ask that question. And if you ask our attorney what we produce instruments of service. Okay, what is that?
That's usually where I go to answer that question, is my attorney.
Yes. Well, I've asked that question. What do we produce? What do we think we produce? Well, you ask the designers. Aspirational buildings. We change people's view of how the landscape goes. Okay, I agree. We do some of that. What else do we do? Well, we help commerce by making projects buildable, and we engage in the community, building community. Okay, we do that. Yes, the attorney, we use instruments of service, and we manage our liability. That's what we do. And you somehow have to step back and go, what we really do, if we do it smart, is we attract the right people to do all of that stuff. We don't do any of that without the right people. And we have the right people. Sometimes we might think we don't, but I think if you stop long enough and go ask the people why they're thinking about leaving or why they are fighting with somebody, they're probably missing something in their core competency that we're not supporting.
It's yeah, that's a good way. We could keep going for another hour, but we are out of time, and
Okay.
so it's a really good way to end it. The And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll come back and continue the conversation. There's a whole lot more here we can dive into. But
Well, my current company, I will leave you with this, Kyle. My current company is having a principals retreat in January, and we have an entire day set aside for strengths finders. I'll let you know how that comes out.
that's fantastic. That is so cool to hear. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the conversation. If you want to get more involved with Ripple Intent, of course, the website, rippleintent.org. We're all over LinkedIn. Find us there. Find John. Find me. Find Mike there as well. But yeah, with that, we will leave you. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you again, Mike, for being here. Appreciate the time today.